To quiet down and take their seats, we are going to begin. Good afternoon, and welcome to the City Club of Eugene's July 17th, 2026 program, Effective Nonprofit Board Governance. My name is Alyssa Gilbert, President of the City Club of Eugene. It's my honor to welcome you to another of the many forums we've held since 1990 in the name of our mission to build community vision through open inquiry. City Club creates access to our local leaders and provides a platform for Eugene area community members to be heard. In light of the division we're experiencing in the world, I believe it's important now more than ever for us to gather as a community with curious minds and mutual respect. This space to listen, ask, learn, and gather is what City Club aims to provide to our community each week. Anyone who attends a City Club forum has equal access to asking questions in our space. We would love for you to browse our past programs at cityclubofeugene.org or our YouTube or Facebook. Please consider becoming a member if you'd like to support our rigorous volunteer work as Oregon's only city club that provides weekly forums. Now I'd like to thank our sponsors. The University of Oregon has helped Oregonians question critically, think logically, reason effectively, communicate clearly, act creatively, and live ethically since 1876. Get more information at uoregon.edu. Lane Community College transforms lives through learning. LCC provides comprehensive, accessible, high-quality educational opportunities that promote student success. For more information, visit lanecc.edu. Thank you to Lane County for their generous support and to our web host, 9 Planets, whose website support is critical to our functioning, making it easy to sign up as a member or learn more about us. Quick reminder to everyone here in person to silence your cell phones, please. I had the pleasure of coordinating today's forum alongside my co-coordinator, Dawn Doucette, who I'd like to invite up to introduce today's forum.
Good morning, and thank you for attending this session on nonprofit board governance. My name is Dawn Doucette, a program committee member and a City Club member. Many of you are aware that there are quite a few nonprofit organizations in Eugene. As these organizations play a major role in our community, providing vital services, employing thousands of individuals and supporting the region's economic development. It may surprise you to learn that the Eugene-Springfield area is home to over 2,500 nonprofit organizations, all governed by the volunteer board of directors. This program will focus on the characteristics and best practices of nonprofit boards and the role they play in enabling two very different nonprofits represented here to accomplish major organizational goals. First, Jennifer Monaghan, Director of Membership and Development and Communications for the Nonprofit Association of Oregon, will describe the best practices of effective board governance. Jennifer journeyed into the world of nonprofit leadership and fundraising, began when she worked closely with patients navigating the struggles of paying for their medical bills during her time in patient financial services. And over the past 19 years, she has played a developmental and fundraising role in organizations like Volunteers in Medicine, Food for Lane County, Cascades Raptor Center, and Ophelia's Place. Andrew Kollick, on the end, was past president of the board of Food for Lane County. Will describe key characteristics of its board and the role it has played in a major refresh of its brand. In addition to the service on the board of Food for Lane County, Andrew is past president of the City Club of Eugene, the president of the Roundtable Club of Eugene, and the Oregon chair of U.S. term limits. Andrew is the director of global policy development at Airbnb, and previous positions as deputy policy director to the New York City Controller and staff attorney at the American Civil Liberties Union. Riley Grechko, I get it right? Okay. We both grew up in Polish households. But First Vice President of the Children's Legacy Foundation, which will describe key characteristics of its board and its process of developing its new bylaws and practices required to become an independent 501c3 organization after splitting off from its former international affiliation with Active 2030 Club. Riley also serves as a development specialist, director of human resources, and grant writer for Adventure Children's Museum, and fundraising consultant for the Firm Ridge Library Foundation. With that, let me turn this program over to Jennifer.
He's a little taller than I am. So, hi everyone. Thank you so much for having us all today. As Dawn said, my name is Jennifer Monaghan. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Director of Membership, Development, and Communications at the Nonprofit Association of Oregon. NAO is the membership organization that supports the 2,500 nonprofits in Lane County and the over 20,000 nonprofits throughout the state of Oregon. So I'm here to give you kind of a little overview about like what good board governance looks like. So when your nonprofits have volunteer-led boards, they are responsible for the governance of the organization, not of the management of the organization. And I think that that's something that often gets confused in volunteer boards, especially when you're working with a founding board, or you're working with a board that's been around a really long time and doesn't have term limits. And I'll briefly say have term limits if you're on a board that doesn't, because that is a best practice, is having term limits. So just to be like brass tacks, there's three main duties for a board, and that is the duty of care, the duty of loyalty, and the duty of obedience. What do these things mean? The duty of care is you show up and you pay attention, you be present. Having board members, there's this interesting thing that happens on boards, and I'm currently the board vice president and secretary of the Oregon Supported Living Program. I've also served on other boards in our community. Oftentimes you have board members who join because they think they want to be involved, but then they realize the weight of what being a board member is, and so maybe they just don't really care that much, or they just show up. Or you have board members who join because they want to put it on their resume that they serve on these boards. So the first thing is use good judgment, show up, be there, be at those meetings, make sure that you're being involved and you're asking questions. As the board, you don't oversee the staff, you oversee the executive director. And so ask questions of the executive director, look at the finances. Duty of loyalty is putting the mission first and remembering why you're there. If you're serving on a board and you're not invested in their mission, find a board that you believe in. Find an organization that you feel you connect with. So for example, I serve on the Oregon Supported Living Board because I believe people who experience intellectual and developmental disabilities have the right to be included in our community. If I didn't believe that, I should not be on that board. I should find another board that I feel passionate about. And then duty of obedience, and this is the one I'm going to talk about probably the most, is follow the rules and stay rooted in your mission and make sure that you're doing your best by the organization. I only have 10 minutes. This is literally like a 3-hour conversation. NAO, I'm taking notes from a self-guided learning that we're getting ready to release, and it's literally a 3-hour thing that you would go through. So I want to talk about knowing the difference between governance and management, because I think this is where we get in the weeds as boards, and this is where those best practices slip. You come into a board with all of these great ideas, and staff comes to you and they ask you questions, and then you start getting into the weeds. I had a staff member who came and started talking to me about how a program should be run, because they know me because I worked briefly at OSLP, and I had to explain to them, I'm happy to listen to your ideas, but as a board, I don't make those decisions. Or if there are staffing issues, those go through the executive director first. Now, if there's an issue with the executive director, there should be a grievance process. OSLP, we have an anonymous email that staff can send their grievances, and that comes directly to me as in my role on the board. But I shouldn't be in the weeds telling the ED how they should be managing their staff, how they should be doing their day-to-day work. Those are not the roles of the board. So what are the roles? What is best governance? What does that look like? You're there to advance the mission, strategy, and outcomes and the vision. You're there to make sure that that mission, that there isn't mission drift. So, for example, OSLP is, okay, I can't think of our, this is really bad, I can't think of our mission straight off of it. I'm in my 50s, so all you women know that I'm gonna lose thoughts. It just happens. So, you have a mission of an organization and say, so NAO, our mission is to support nonprofits. So if we started going out and raising funds and having a foundation and, trying to find ways to distribute those funds, that's mission drift for us. That's not what we do. We support nonprofits through capacity building, through advocacy, and through support. So if our board started being like, well, you should really open a food bank in this rural community that needs it, well, that's not our mission. So that wouldn't be what we would do. But unfortunately, a lot of board members do that. And they say, well, why don't we do Z? But Z doesn't have anything to do with A. So really concentrating on how can you help advance the mission. And if there's a conversation to be had about if you feel like you should be doing other things, have that at the board level. And if that's something the board says, you know what, that would be a good program to introduce, or maybe we should do that, then that becomes a bigger discussion. But it's not up to the board to make that decision. Strategic and annual planning. Strategic plans are everybody's least favorite thing, but they're important to have because it shows how you move forward as an organization. We just did strategic planning and our board was involved in it. They help us guide what we should be doing. Are we planting in the right season? Are we prepared for what's coming? The last year and a half has been really, really hard on nonprofits. There's been a lot of federal cuts. There's been a lot of state cuts. There's a lot of pass-through funds that people don't even realize are impacted at the federal level. Donors are having to make really hard decisions about where to give their money and who to support. We talk about the Maslow hierarchy of needs at NAO. And so a lot of money is starting to go into those basic needs like food and shelter and things like the arts, like the WOW Hall. Those are struggling to find funding because donors are shifting where they fund. So as a board member, you need to help that plan of how do we weather this storm? Are we financially stable? Where are our financial pockets that might go away? How do we get through this? What happens if we lose funding? I know several organizations have lost significant funding. And so that comes down to the board to make sure that you're financially strong. Policy oversight, key policies. You need to be aware of the key policies and what's going on in the organization. Sorry, this could be really long, so I'm trying to be really quick. And it's not, you're not writing the policy, you're approving the policies. So again, it's that who does what. Legal compliance, fiscal oversight. It's really important to know as a board member, you are responsible. So you want to make sure that if you serve on a board, they have directors and operators insurance, because if something happens and there is a lawsuit, the board is fiscally managing the organization, and so you want to make sure that your board of directors is protected from that. Fundraising and external relationships. This is one of the things board members have the hardest time to do, and it's really one of the most critical parts of being on a board. You are the champions of these organizations. You are the connectors and the community builders. You are the people who believe in these organizations because you serve on their boards. You're a volunteer. You are not a paid staff member. You have something to say and some reason that you serve, and that is why you are there. So fundraising doesn't have to mean you're asking for donations, but it means you're connecting the people who do. So a really good example, we have Rebecca Sprinson. She's the development director at Food Filling County in the room. If you're a board member and you don't want to ask for money, you would connect them to Rebecca. You would go, hey, Rebecca, I know this donor. I think they would be really good to connect to Food Filling County. Let me make an introduction. So board members need to not be afraid to make connections and not be afraid of that fundraising aspect of being a board member, because it doesn't have to be scary. It can be making a thank you call to a donor. It can be showing up at a donor appreciation event and explaining, getting up in front of them, explain why you serve. It can be connecting people, it can be bringing friends to something, it can be going to galas. So there's lots of ways to do those external relationships around fundraising without actually being the one that says, okay, so now will you give me money? Because making those connections is just as critical. And how am I on time? I think I've got that's what I was just gonna say. I think I've about 2 more minutes. And then, like I said, there was no way I was gonna get through all of this. And then, finally, quickly, let's talk about this executive director. One of the other biggest roles you have is you are the supervisors of the executive director. Executive directors are critical to our missions. Executive directors need to have timely reviews. They need to be supported. They need to have somebody who can be a sounding board. And they also need to be held accountable. We don't want to just sit back and let an executive director do whatever they're going to do if we see that it may be harming the organization. Now, we're not managing the other directors. We're not managing the other staff. That is not our role. But we are supporting and managing the executive director to make sure that the mission is headed in the right direction. Those evaluations are critical. Any place you work, you get any place you work, you should get an annual performance review. Executive directors should do the same. And a lot of board members don't know that. And so then a year goes by or 2 years goes by, and somebody finally goes, gosh, have we given the executive director a raise? And they're like, oh no, we haven't done an evaluation of the executive director in 2 years. Well, how do you know what's happening in the organization? Because a good evaluation means that you're getting feedback from staff, that you're looking at what's going on in the community, and that the executive director is fulfilling their role as described in their job description. And if you're not giving feedback and you're not doing that analysis, then you actually don't know what's going on. And so it's really important to do that, and it's really important to be supportive. And you don't want to lose a good executive director. If you're not doing reviews and you're not doing pay increases, and you have a really stellar executive director, they'll go to another nonprofit. There are 2,500 of them here. There are 20,000 in the state. We just did this at OSLP. We had to sit down and look at competitive wages and say, what are we doing? Because we don't want to lose this person who's walking through, we just went through a huge merger, who's walking through taking us from a $12 million to a $22 million organization. So it's really, really critical that you are supporting that executive director. And then finally, really quick, also helping recruit board members and making sure those board members are a good fit. So I'm going to stop because that is at my 10 minutes, and I will pass it on. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Riley Grichko. Thank you to Jennifer for that amazing 10 minutes. I know it's a lot to fit in 10 minutes, but if you wanted to create a podcast about all of your knowledge of nonprofits, I think everybody here would listen to it. I'm Riley Grichko. I'm here on behalf of the Children's Legacy Foundation Network, or CLF Network for short. Our club was actually founded in 1927, so we're almost 100 years old. And up until March of 2024, we were actually part of an international and national organization, the Active 2030 Club. There used to be dozens of clubs all over in Portland, Salem, Beaverton, Medford, pretty much all along I-5. There were clubs pretty much everywhere. And the ultimate goal of each club was to help underserved kids while providing leadership opportunities for young professionals between the ages of 20 and 40 years old. And because we were under the umbrella of this organization, similar to Rotary or Lions clubs as well, we paid dues or fees to the national organization hub, which was in Sacramento, every year for each member that we had. And that's about $110 per person. And for each year, especially for our club where we had 70 to 80 members, that was about $10,000 going out of our community, and we wouldn't see that money again. And that was every year. So that money was coming directly from members who wanted to join and help kids in our community, or their employers who wanted them to gain these leadership and philanthropic skills. So again, just money that's leaving the community and we're not really seeing it come back, which didn't really serve our mission of helping kids in our community. So in late 2023, our board started discussing how to leave national and go off on our own. We still wanted to have the same mission of helping kids in the community, but we wanted to make sure that that money stayed in this community. And we still wanted to provide those leadership opportunities to young professionals. So we'd seen success from other clubs who had also chosen to leave and go off on their own. And we actually reached out to them about what they had done just to get some resources and support from them. Our board is kind of unique in its structure in that we have 4 executive members. So we have a second vice president, a first vice president, a president, and then an immediate past president. And each of them has different functions within the organization. And then we also have 4 directors who act as liaisons between the board and the rest of the membership. And then we have a treasurer, a secretary, and an activator, which is kind of the person who keeps things in order when we kind of drift off in our board meetings. So the board met a bunch of times, had a bunch of meetings about how we could do this and how we could make it as painless as possible, because leaving one organization while still trying to keep everything intact as much as possible was very difficult. But we were able to do it. The board unanimously voted to leave national, and then we brought this decision to our membership because they all, as members, have a vote, and they all voted for us to be the board members on their behalf. So it was only right to bring that decision to them, and they also voted unanimously to leave. So then we got to work on logistics and behind-the-scenes elements, including completely rewriting our bylaws, which we had adopted from the national organization, and so they were a little bit outdated. They weren't super inclusive, so we completely rewrote them so that they were more inclusive, they were up to date, and they made the most sense for our organization to maximize helping as many kids in Lane County as possible. We had graphic designers who were members of our club who created our new logo and colors. And we had a law firm who actually came on board pro bono to assist with the paperwork, changing our name, getting everything sorted with the state, which is also a pain. So they did this for us pro bono, and we did all of this for free. We completely changed the organization to what it is now for free, which is pretty amazing because I feel like there's a lot that goes into it, a lot of the behind the scenes stuff. We spent maybe like 8 months doing this before we even made it public. So then we launched our new name and logo and colors in March of 2024, and we are proud now to be the Children's Legacy Foundation Network, or CLF Network for short. And the name really reflects like who we're serving, children, and the group of people behind the work, which is the network. And we do a lot. We have 9 core projects, which either raise money or act as various drives for items that kids might need. So I'm just going to run through these real quick and then get back to talking more about the board. But we have our Clothes for Kids, which collects hundreds of pounds of clothing in the spring for kids in the 4J school district. And then in fall, any of our non-coats that we get from our Coats for Kids drive, we donate to kids in the Springfield school district. And then going to our Coats for Kids drive, we collect brand new or gently used waterproof coats in the fall. We send them to dry cleaning partners and then sort them for about 10 or 11 nonprofit partners that we work with, so that we can give those coats to kids to keep them warm for the winter. Our children's shopping spree is a very popular one among our members. We get to take 40 kids back to school shopping, which is super cute. We give over $200 in brand new clothing and accessories to each kid, as well as a brand new backpack with school supplies and a lunchbox full of non-perishable items per kid as well, so that they're ready for the school year when it starts. Our Giving Tree project, which might be the one that we're most known for, is also a favorite of members and community members. We serve over 2,200 kids each holiday season. We run the holiday trees that are inside Valley River Center. All of those ornaments that are on those trees represent a kid and their needs and wishes for the holiday season. So then we have community members go out and shop for those kids and then return the gifts to us. We sort them, we add 2 gifts that might need a little extra magic, and then we have pickups with our nonprofit partners who deliver them directly to the families. Similarly, for our Trees of Hope, we take families out to a Christmas tree farm and have them pick out, cut down, and take home a tree for the holidays so that they can have a Christmas tree in their home. And then for our fundraising projects, we do Children's Charity Raffle, which we sell about 2,000 tickets for a chance to win one of 3 prize packages. Our Duck Pen, which is another one that we're probably pretty popular for, we do all of the bike valet for the home football games and all of the special events that happen at Autzen Stadium. So it's $5 to park your bike with us, and then all those proceeds go directly back to kids in Lane County. And we just get to hang out and have a little tailgate while you guys enjoy the game inside. We have our annual golf tournament every year as well, and there are a lot of nonprofits that do golf tournaments, but ours is kind of unique because we sell cheat codes. So if you wanted to skip right to the green, you could purchase a teleport, or you can get extra mulligans just to kind of one-up your game. And again, it all goes back to kids in the community. And we're also starting a new core project this year, a community-wide scavenger hunt where teams get to go and complete silly little tasks, and then they get prizes at the end of it. And all of those projects raise money that immediately goes back to our community. We don't have an executive director, we don't have any paid staff, we don't really have any overhead costs. We're all doing this, we're all volunteering our time for this, even the board. And so 100% of the funds that we raise go back to children in need in our community, which is kind of the purpose behind our transition, is to make sure that that money stays in the community. We also have 14 different committees that we run. We do single-day staffing events to support nonprofits with their fundraisers. So maybe if OSLP is staffing a gala, then we're there supporting them as volunteers who might help so that the staff can focus on the gala. We also have socials and other events that we put on for our members and guests. And then we have a board that rotates every 6 months, which is also kind of unique. Sometimes I feel like terms for boards are usually between 1 and 3 years. Ours is 6 months. Some of our positions are a year long. Our directors usually stay on for an entire year, but each of our positions otherwise are 6 months. And that just allows our members to gain leadership experience and nonprofit experience on our board before they might do what Jennifer is doing and serve on every other board. So yeah, it's just a way for us to continue giving those leadership skills to young professionals so that they can go on and do even more great work in the community. All of this to say that we have a membership of about almost 100 members who are young professionals between the ages of 21 and 50. We all come together weekly with a full calendar, and we all do it just to help kids in Lane County. We actually just gave out over $38,000 this past week to 15 different nonprofits who are serving kids in the community. And all of that effort came from people who take their time out of their day to volunteer, and I think that's pretty special. So thank you all.
I've always had to try to convince my mother that I am caring, dutiful, and obedient. And now Jennifer has made that clear. That it's proven. I don't have to convince Mom anymore. Just say, hey, I'm on board. Thank you for having me, City Club. My name's Andrew Kallick. Last time I was up here in this capacity, I think I was representing the millennial generation, which was very fun, and the time before that I was running for office, which was considerably less fun. So it's great to be here talking to you in a nonprofit capacity about nonprofit board membership. Jennifer gave a great overview of what the duty, care, and obedience, and what the obligations are of board members, so I won't go any further into that. But one thing I do want to mention is that that 2,500 board number that we raised at the top, those are 2,500 very different organizations. You have one that I'm a part of still, Food for Lane County, a complex organization run by a professional staff with a multi-million-dollar budget and a county-wide operation. And then you have City Club, which had a part-time employee when I first joined and has been operating with no employees for several years now, all on the backs of our volunteers who put weekly programs together. And then you have the roundtable clubs of the world where the job is even more simple. Make sure people have fun 8 nights a year. They get a decent dinner, and you keep the sort of spirit of the club and its history alive. Those are very different. And the reason that I mention that is because if you've thought about board membership and thought, oh, I don't know if this is for me, I sort of want you to know it is for you. You might just need to find the board membership and the type of board that fits what you're looking for. Because believe me, they need you. So talk to us about different places where we've served and the different connections we can facilitate, and you'll be off to the races. And you'll be the better for it, and so will the community. So now what I'm going to talk about is, just for a couple minutes, what a major project looked and felt like from the perspective of a board member of Food for Lane County. And this was a project that involved a rebrand of Food for Lane County's website, its logo. 40 years after its founding, I think the organization was looking for a more modern look for its brand, one that would emerge from the community and be a more effective way to promote its mission, which is to reduce hunger by engaging our community to create access to food. And, you know, some of you in this audience are probably much different than me, but branding and design are not my bag. It's not my professional discipline. I can barely draw a stick figure. My 7-year-old artist in residence tells me, just stick to drawing flags, Dad. That's what you know. So this was something that was out of my comfort zone, as it was for lots of board members. And yet, here I was, chair-elect at the time, and then later chair during a time of this sort of once-in-a-generation rebrand. I knew I had some role to play in that, and the board had some role to play in that, but what? What was it? After all, we had that professional staff that I mentioned, folks who do know about branding, who do know about design. So what is a volunteer board member to do? Well, it starts with exercising the kind of fiduciary oversight you'd expect, making sure there were no conflicts in the selection of a consultant to help us with this, ensuring that the funds were spent wisely and in furtherance of the mission. We didn't just want a fancy new shirt. We wanted something that really mattered to the mission. But the role went beyond that. We as a board needed to make our voice heard with regard to how we thought the process should go, or at the minimum, the principles that should guide the process. Again, as Jennifer mentioned, you're not managing the day-to-day. You're not even making the vast majority of the decisions. But as a board member, you have to think, what are the principles that I want to see sort of guide this process? So really, there were two that the board felt very strongly about. One was, particularly given the nature of Food for Lane County's work and the fact that it operates across a huge portion of our community, we wanted the rebrand to emerge from the community rather than being imposed upon it. And so a major way in which the team went about this was doing a survey of thousands of people across Lane County from the coast to the Cascades. We also engaged the staff at Food for Lane County, who of course are the closest people to the actual execution of this mission. And that was very important from a board perspective. We also wanted to make sure that, again, this wasn't just like a fancy coat on top, that actually this rebrand and the rebuilding of our website prioritized functionality that would enhance the ability of community members to access the services that we really wanted them to access. And so if you go to the new Food for Lane County website now, what you'll see, among other things, is a beautiful rebrand, our new logo. I brought my hat here. For those of you on the radio, you can't see this glorious hat, but it has the wonderful new logo on it, which includes this sort of flower and fork combination, very much from our Willamette Valley roots. But what you'll also see on the website is a food finder. This is not something we had on the website before, where if you're going to the website because you are in need of food, or you know someone who is, or you just want to learn more about how the organization functions, there's a little map there and a little search functionality that you can find where different food sites are, when they're operating, who's operating them, and do that in a wide variety of languages as well. So again, from the board's perspective, we were not doing the day-to-day work on this. We did not take credit for that. That is not our responsibility at an organization like Food for Lane County. Instead, what we're thinking about is, okay, what principles should drive this process, and how should we be thinking about this in terms of the long term? It's been 40 years, since Food for Lane County started. I guess it was 1984, actually. But this is probably not going to happen again for another 40 years, so let's get it right this time. And I'll close by mentioning one more big project that came along during my time as chair-elect and then chair of the board at Food for Lane County, which again made us as a board think about the long term, which was the purchase of an amazing piece of property for our youth farm. We used to rent a piece of property, use a piece of property that was actually owned by Springfield Public Schools. And we had the opportunity, thanks to the generosity of several amazing donors and the generosity of the people of the state of Oregon, the state gave a major grant for this, to buy a sort of permanent home for the youth farm. But thinking again about Jennifer's sort of A to Z, obviously farming is very sort of close to the mission of food, but running a farm is not necessarily something that immediately aligns with the rest of Food for Lane County's mission. So what we had to figure out is, okay, we have this extraordinary once-in-a-generation opportunity to do this. How are we going to make sure that our investment in this is not only sustainable, but is actually fruitful, pun intended, for the future of our organization and actually contributes to the mission? And I think if any of you have gone to our new farm, that you have already seen that the investment in this is doing exactly that. But that's what the board has to do. Think about that long-term vision and what we need to do to make the most of it. Thanks for your time. Look forward to your questions.
Before we begin our Q&A, a special thank you to our award-winning public radio station, KLCC, for airing City Club programs on Mondays at 7 p.m. In the metro area of Lane County, they broadcast on 89.7 FM and in Florence on 88.1 FM. For those listening at home or in transit right now, your household is one of several thousand tuning into City Club on KLCC. We're grateful and honored to have you. You can also find all recent City Club programs archived at klcc.org, as well as our YouTube channel and the City Club of Eugene podcast. Feel free to line up at the microphone, and we'll have a short break before we begin our Q&A.
If you have questions, please take the opportunity to line up. Is this on? Okay, it's time for questions now. Those of you with questions, could we please ask you to to join the crowd here? And others, thank you for all your excited conversation, but let's go on now to questions, okay? First question. Now let me just say, make sure that we really like to make sure that our questions are questions as opposed to long statements of things, but so if you could keep that, if you could keep the questions pretty pertinent and within, a minute or so, that would be great.
Thank you, everybody. I'm on right. Okay. So I'm Peter Dudley. I'm executive coach, and I work with a lot of executive directors of nonprofits. I've served on nonprofit boards. One thing I'm seeing, not just here in Lane County, but with executive directors I work with around the country, is growing burnout. And knowing that the ED reports to the board, a lot board members are volunteers, so there's this sort of tension between keeping your volunteers engaged, not exposing the burnout that you feel. What advice would you have for boards, board chairs, board members for ensuring that your EDs are properly supported during this really, really difficult time?
So I'll take this, you guys can add. So this is something we experience at NAO all the time. This is a lot of feedback that we hear from executive directors and from board members. I think one of the most important things you can do as a board member is make sure that you're available to talk to your executive director, that your executive director doesn't feel like they have to put on a happy face when they talk to you and pretend that everything's okay. I check in often with our executive director at OSLP to see how things are going in the organization, to sit down and have a conversation. We'll go to coffee, just to make sure that he is feeling supported, because burnout is real and it's really, really hard right now. Nonprofit work is really, really hard right now. You're seeing burnout at every level, from programs to development to executive directors, like staff is burned out. So my biggest thing is be checking in with your executive director, not just at board meetings, because at board meetings they're there for a purpose, there's an agenda, you have to get through it, the board has questions, but make sure at least one board member has a relationship, hopefully more. I know I'm not the only person who checks in on Jesse, so that they know that you are supportive of them. And then also do those annual performance reviews, because it's not about criticizing their performance, it's how can we support, how can we make sure that you have the tools that you need to feel supported so you can continue in this role. So that's what I would do.
Riley or Andrew, anything to add?
I think you nailed it.
Okay.
I would also say, because you could give honest praise because you've seen the performance more often. All right, Mary Layton, City Club member, I have 2 items. One is just a naked recruitment, and some of you have already heard this. Network Charter School needs board members. That means somebody who's willing to pay attention to what's going on, not necessarily do fundraising, but pay attention. Remember, there's a goal. It's the same goal for every high school in the region, achieve state standards. This is a very hands-on program. So anyway, if you're interested, let me know. I'll be here for a while. Okay, the other one is a question about whether or not to form a 501c3. So the other hat I wear is to lead the Interfaith Food Hub. And there is a movement afoot to form that into another 501c3. I'm not interested in doing that because we have no paid employees. Nobody charges us anything for the work we do. 2 churches contribute licensed kitchens, and a third contributes fiscal management. So we have no costs associated with operations. I'm the fundraiser, so that doesn't matter. But I'm curious about, is there an advantage I'm not considering in having your own independent 501c3?
Having now had a minute to think about the last question, I'm going to answer that one first and then Mary's. On the executive director, I think 2 things. One, as a board member, you should be asking tough questions so that the executive director isn't the only one who has to ask tough questions. That's first. And the second, with regard to the reviews, is that many board members, I think, feel like they're in a circumstance in which they have limited visibility actually into the executive director's work. And so I think it's important for boards to integrate the feedback that the executive director receives from his or her reports into their own evaluation, because it's, you know, as a board member, you can be pretty detached from the day-to-day, whereas the staff, of course, are not. So that's my answer to that. Mary, on the 501c3, I think about this in terms of City Club all the time, because I'll tell you right now, from my point of view, the not insignificant burdens associated with maintaining the 501c3 are pretty real for a group of our size. And so then you wonder, okay, well, what are the benefits? Well, there's a tax advantage for those who are, you know, bestowing us with their generosity. I think that's important. How important that is, I'm not sure. There's also a sort of legitimacy advantage. If you don't have a corporate structure of some kind, what's to keep, you know, the board members or any volunteer from, you know, running off with the generosity of our volunteers and our members. So I imagine that there are some benefits that outweigh those impositions, but I sure wish the impositions were more streamlined, especially for smaller organizations, because it's real. And you were lucky enough, Riley, to have, you know, a lawyer help you out with it. But you know, lawyers have to pay the bills too. God bless them. I'm one of them. So you don't want to just rely on that generosity all the time. And so I think it's something that people should think about long and hard before they decide to jump in.
Riley, you might have something to say about this.
Yeah, when we were first transitioning to CLF Network, one of the things that we considered was we were a 501c4, which is different from a 501c3 for a couple parameters. And so we thought we had a foundation that is a 501c3 whose mission is to further our mission. So we had that relationship already, and it was a bit strained during this transition because some of the people on that foundation board couldn't see the vision at the time, and so there was a little conflict there. So we ended up staying as a 501c4 for the network side, and our foundation is a 501c3 still, and still they changed their name as well so that they're still serving their mission of helping us. So there's a lot of give and take. There's a lot of logistics, and yes, we were very grateful to have a pro bono lawyer, because that would incur a lot of fees very quickly for looking over all of our bylaws and policies and procedures. So if you don't already have those resources, it makes it a lot more difficult. But I do encourage you to reach out to other nonprofits who maybe are still starting with their 501c3 status or have been around for a very long time, to give kind of both of those perspectives of whether or not it's a good idea to do that.
Next question.
Hi, Bill Kleppinger, and over 30 years, I think I've been on 5 or 6 nonprofit boards and around town. 2 questions. One, is there an ideal size for boards? I've been in some boards where there's too many people and nothing gets done. The other question is, and it's been partially answered, is the relationship between the board president and the executive director. I've heard somebody say, maybe it was you, Jennifer, that board members the members act directly with the executive director. And is there some kind of ideal relationship? Should it just be the president? Should the executive director be at every meeting? So a bunch of stuff there.
So for the second part of that question, I think any board member should have a relationship with the executive director. Board president terms end. The board president transitions. I'm board vice president and secretary. So I think that board members should have relationships. All board members should have relationships with the executive director. The executive director really should be at board meetings. They should not be at executive session. So boards can, for those who don't know, boards have the ability to call an executive session. An executive session would be called when there is confidential information that needs to be talked about. So in the case of maybe you have something financially going on and you suspect, malfeasance or something, or you have a tough conversation that you have to have as a board that doesn't or shouldn't involve the executive director. But I think it's important that the executive director be at board meetings. For the size of a board, legally, you only have to have 3 board members. You have to have a president, a secretary, and a treasurer. So at NAO, we have 13 staff members. We have 14 board members. My executive director will tell you that board is too big. I agree with him. As far as the ideal size, it's kind of dependent on the demands on the board, on is it a volunteer run or is it a volunteer run organization with no staff? Is it a board like Food for Lane County that has multiple committees under it? Is it a board like CLF? So it's really dependent on the organization, but the more cooks you have in the kitchen, the harder it's going to be to make decisions. And so when you get to the size of like our board of 14 at NAO, it takes forever for decisions to get made because there's so many differing opinions. So I don't know that there's an ideal, but have term limits and because you want to have board turnover. But that's kind of on a case-by-case basis based on the needs of the organization.
Thanks. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to add, I think it also helps if each board member has a specific role. For CLF's board, each of our board members is bringing something to the board meeting every time. They're not just showing up because they're on the board. So I think it definitely helps to make sure that they know what their role is within being on the board. Yeah.
I think you also want to make sure that the board is big enough to be representative of the community that you are seeking to serve. So in the case of Food for Lane County, for instance, we want to have somebody from the coast on the board because there's a different set of challenges, opportunities, and perspectives that, are helpful to have if you have somebody from Florence or otherwise. Similarly for a city club, you don't want to have everybody from one part of town. You want to represent, the places that you're trying to get to. So don't make it so small that you lose those perspectives you need to fulfill your mission.
Thanks. Thank you. Next.
Hi, I'm Randy Prince. I have a question about innovation and initiatives and what incentives there are. If I heard you right, you described a situation where an organization might be thinking, we ought to expand. You said, well, that's really not the board. That should come from the executive director, if I heard you right. Now, why would the executive director want to recommend something risky like that? Why rock the boat? They got a steady job. Everything's fine. And what do they have to gain in a nonprofit organization when they do that? I worked for
Is that the question?
Yeah, well, I say, what kind of incentives do you set up? I mean, I retired from an organization, government service, delivering mail. Usual response is cut services, raise prices. If it's needed to expand, how would you depend on an executive director who isn't just seeking to pad the resume and leave and have these necessary innovations? And a couple of you described how major things happened. Where did those initiatives arise and how were they carried out?
I think most folks who seek positions with titles like executive director are people who have some ambition. And therefore, they're not people who get in that seat and think, I just got to keep the wheels running. They want to make their mark, and they want to improve things. And as a board member, I think that's what you want. You want people to come in, recognize what's going well, and keep that moving. But also, if there's areas of opportunity, particularly if there's sort of these generational opportunities once in a while that come along, you want them to be able to seize on that. And so to the extent that there is an incentive, I wouldn't say it's, in the nonprofit sector, it's pretty unusual to have some sort of incentive-based pay package. That's not what it's going to be. But the incentive is making a sort of big step, a big leap in the mission that you've been hired to perform and make your mark on the organization.
Next question.
Hi, my name is Alana Jacobeski. I'm the executive director with Mount Pisgah Arboretum, and we are actively trying to get our board more involved with fundraising, which is a little tricky. And so I know NAO has some great training resources, but just wondering if you all have any other additional free or low-cost accessible resources for training board on fundraising.
We do. I'm also happy to grab coffee and talk about those resources because there's so many ways to have boards involved in fundraising, and we have to think out of the box and meet our board members where they're at and their comfort levels. We do have some free resources. We do have some free materials that I can share with you, and you guys are members, so I will send you some information. But fundraising is really scary, and when you say to a board member, who maybe hasn't served on a board, or
some thoughts on how to support a brand new, someone who didn't intend on becoming a nonprofit. So, thank you.
Look at what you've got yourself into. That's great. So City Club, as I mentioned, also does not have staff at this point in its life cycle. And what that's meant is that we have to be very clear when we're recruiting board members that, you get your hands dirty. You're doing the work of the organization, for whether it's volunteers or board members. And I think being upfront with people about what the expectation is and what the opportunity is helpful, because some people won't want that, but some people will. Some people don't want to just sort of review a board packet once a month and hang out in a meeting. They want to dig in. And the more you're clear about what that opportunity is and the type of things that a board member might be able to contribute and make their mark, to the earlier question, I think the more likely you are to get people to raise their hands and say, I'm with you.
Yeah, I would just add to that. For CLF, we do a lot of recruitment socials and events and activities all throughout town. So just having those recruitment events where you're talking to people on a one-on-one basis about what you're doing and what you're looking for in more volunteers and board members.
and I'll give you my card and we can connect later.
Joel Curran, City Club member since 2012. Before I ask my question, I have one comment about the size of the board. It should be an odd number of people. Otherwise, you're doomed to gridlock.
Not odd, but an odd number.
It depends on the board. The question I have is, there are about 175,000 people in Eugene. There are about 2,500 organizations. That's one organization for every 70 people. Are there too many? Do they overlap? Can they be consolidated for purpose to enhance the mission better for everyone?
Yes.
That's not a yes or no answer.
Yes, yes, and. I think the most important thing that nonprofits need to do, because you're right, it's like one for every 70, is how do we collaborate? How do we work together? Because we do have a lot of organizations whose missions overlap. One thing that when people ask me, I want to start a new nonprofit, my first question is, why? What do you do that is unique? And are there other organizations doing similar work that you can partner with? Because 2,500 is a lot in our little tiny community, and it's a lot of the same donors. It's the same businesses being asked over and over and over to support. It's the same people serving on the boards. So it's a lot of demand. And so I think when people are looking at how their nonprofit is different or unique and how they can work together, it's really important to dig in. I think that the Lavender Network is a really good example of collaboration. So they opened this hub on Willamette Street. It has Queer Eugene. Eugene Pride has an office there. HIV Alliance has an office there, and Transponder. So those are 4 nonprofits that came together in a community hub. Now they're all still in their own nonprofits, but how do they overlap? How can they collaborate, and how can they work together? And so we need more of that. Plaza de Comunidad, they were 3 nonprofits who combined into one nonprofit because they realized they were doing very similar work. And when you can combine and become one, then you have access to maybe more resources. You're not overtaxing your community. Oregon Supported Living, we just acquired Albert Taylor. So they were having troubles, so we've now taken over them. So again, a merger of 2 nonprofits. So there is an overabundance. We have a self-guided course we're working on, and literally the first question is, do you need to start a nonprofit? Why do you want to do this? What is different? And I think those are really important questions. And I'd like to see, personally, I'd like to see more nonprofits work together, talk together, and collaborate with each other. And I think we're seeing a cultural shift. Sorry, there's a bug. I think we're seeing a cultural shift in our communities and in our state of nonprofits starting to look at how they can work together and start collaborating and combining.
Thank you.
Joel, your question also makes me think of something mentioned in a City Club forum on the manufacturing economy of Eugene, where we asked the panelists at the end, what's the one thing you would like to change? And one of the panelists, I think brilliantly said, I don't think Eugene should be afraid of profit. And I think that it's an important reminder that, you could do good work for the community and make a profit too. All the good work doesn't just come from nonprofits.
Our last question.
I'm Sue Walling, City Club member. With 2,500 nonprofits out there, all doing wonderful sounding things, how is somebody who wants to see their money used effectively, how do you evaluate what organizations are well run, which ones not only have a great vision statement, but actually get the work done?
I think the first thing you want to do if you have money and you're looking for a nonprofit to give to is, what are you passionate about and interested in helping? I actually just recently got into a fundraising consultant position with the Fernridge Library Foundation because I love to read. I grew up in libraries. I'm very passionate about that work. So first you should look at all the nonprofits who are serving areas that you're interested in helping. And then after that, you can go to those nonprofits and say, I'm interested in learning more. And then they should be doing the work to tell you, how their board is run and showing you all of the great things that they're doing and really taking you in before they even ask you for money, which is another thing about fundraising for boards. You're not just going up to somebody and asking for money. You're actually establishing that relationship with them first and inviting them to coffee once a week, having them come to the nonprofit space and just volunteering first before you even ask them for money.
I have two separate and distinct answers. One is that a lot of these organizations have financials on their websites. You can go see how much money they're spending on different aspects of their mission, how much is being spent on administration or development or the core mission. And there are organizations out there that evaluate that efficiency. So I think that is important. Food for Lane County does that, and I think we're proud of being able to put that stuff out there. And then the second bit is a little bit, this is harder to judge, but I like to think about, but for this organization, what would happen? What would fill the void, if any? Because if there's an organization that is doing something that effectively no one else can do and it's important enough to do, that's probably an organization that's worth a second look.
Finally, I'll just add to that, there is a website called ProPublica, and you can actually look up the 990s of organizations, and it will tell you who the highest paid employee is and how much they're being paid, and you can see an overview of their financials. That isn't always a good way to judge if an organization's doing good work, and I do want to add the caveat that admin costs are necessary for paying staff, because that is something that you often hear. Grantors are really bad about this. They're like, oh, well, we don't want to see your administration cost is too much. And you hear it in the nonprofit world. Why are you getting paid? So take the admin rates with a grain of salt, because that's the people who are running the programs, running the organizations, raising the funds. Like we can't do our work without administration costs.
Thank you very much. Let's give a round of applause for our great panelists. Just on time. You guys are great.
This has been our July 17th, 2026 conversation at the City Club of Eugene. We'll be back next week here at Wow Hall in downtown Eugene on Friday, July 24th at noon. That program is titled Lane County's Vibrant, Vulnerable Community of Athletes, Artists, Workers, and Activists with Down Syndrome Needs You.